Hi everybody, it's Julia, your trusted travel expert, helping you find that je ne sais quoi wherever you are in the world. And this week I am actually in Washington, D.C., which is one of my favorite cities in the world. I lived here for several years, early in my life, between college and grad school. And I've never done a spotlight on it, but it is such an important city to visit. Really for every American. There's so much to offer, and especially if you are a parent with kids going through school and learning about American history, you definitely need to come to visit DC. So I wanted to give you a few ins and outs about what you should know when you're coming to visit it, some of the logistics, where to stay, what to do, that kind of thing. So if you are at all familiar, DC is like a little bit of a cut-off square with the Potomac River running along the bottom of it, with Virginia being just below and Maryland being just above. And it's a small area, and it is very walkable. It's a very walkable city, but it does sort of spread out from, say, Georgetown over on the west side to Capitol Hill on the east side. And then north of the city, you really don't want to go further north than DuPont Circle, which is sort of in the northwest. And you kind of follow like Massachusetts Avenue down towards the Capitol, and that's sort of your northern border of where you want to stay in DC, give or take-ish. And then there are suburbs in Virginia that you could stay in. Roslyn in particular is just over the river from Georgetown, and they have some great hotels, and that's a good, if you're, say, driving into the city, that might be a good option because parking is slightly easier there than inside the city. I will warn you that parking inside the city is very expensive and very difficult, and driving inside the city can be a little confusing with all their different circles and one-way streets and grids and diagonal streets and stuff like that. So you got to think about, if you are going to drive in, maybe you want to stay outside the city and metro in, or just plan on parking your car in the hotel and using either walking or the subway or Ubers. So just keep that in mind. If you are going to fly into the city, there are actually 3 different airports you could use. Dulles is the most popular and most famous. I-80 is the airport code, but it's like a good 45 minutes outside of the city. It's pretty far over into Virginia, but it is by far the biggest airport, and the most popular, most economical fares and stuff go into that one. The best airport to fly into by far is Reagan National Airport. The airport code for that one is DCA, and that one is just across the Potomac, right below the mall. I mean, it's so close and convenient to everything in DC. It's 10 or 15 minutes into the city. There's metro to it. You could Uber super cheaply. DCA is by far your best option if you can fly into it. Sometimes the flight options are limited, and sometimes they are more expensive. The third option is probably my least favorite, but BWI, Baltimore's airport, is actually only about an hour north of the city, an hour using public transport. It can be a lot shorter if you're driving, but you can actually take public transport to and from Baltimore directly into Union Station, which is right next to Capitol Hill. And so Baltimore can have some really inexpensive flights, and so that could be an option as well if you're flying in. So that's the logistics of DC. What do you want to do in DC? Well, there is a ton to do in DC. Obviously, you have Capitol Hill, you have the White House. If you want to do a tour of Capitol Hill, that's easy, that's no problem. But if you want to do a tour of the White House, you do need to speak to your local representatives or senators to kind of get a tour, and you have to book well in advance. So just be aware of that. Between the Capitol and the Lincoln Memorial is the mall, and that's the big open green space where you see all the inauguration people, all the parades. It's the big green space that is ringed by museums and memorials. Most of the memorials are on the west side near the Lincoln Memorial, and most of the museums are more towards the Capitol side, but they're all amazing, they're all free, and they're all just really important to visit. I mean, you've got, I'm not even going to name them all because there's too many. I mean, but from the Washington Monument, which is the big obelisk in the middle, to the Lincoln Memorial, and to all the different museums I'm in the National Portrait Gallery, which is actually not on the mall, but it is an example of one of the many museums. They're almost all free here in the city. You've got the Museum of Natural History, you've got the African American Museum, which you do still have to make reservations for because it's new and it's very in demand. You've got the National Gallery of Art, you've got the Smithsonian, you've got Hirshhorn Sculpture Museum, the Museum of American Indians. There's so many museums And again, they're all free. If you want to go see the Declaration of Independence, that's in the National Archives, which is also on the mall. The Holocaust Museum is just off the mall, but it is fantastic. It's still one of the best Holocaust memorial museums in the world. And so, I mean, there's the Mint. There's so much to see here in DC, and that's just the museums. There is also the Air and Space Museum. Used to be on the mall, and I think there is still a version on the mall, but the big one is out by Dulles Airport. So if you're really into the space program and the history of flight and stuff like that, you might want to make sure that you have a full day to go out to the Dulles Airport area to see that. But you know what? That's just the official touristy, museumy stuff to do in DC, because there's so much. This is such a dining city now. It's got such a vibrant eating scene. There are lots of really cool hotels, cool bars. Everything from historic dining to really the newest and coolest. And Jose Andres has a bunch of restaurants here. I mean, it's just anything you could possibly want to eat. There's also a very international scene here in DC because of all the embassies and the embassy staff and stuff like that. So you can find all kinds of authentic, Ethiopian food, any kind of culture's food you can find in DC. It's amazing. Outside of DC, there is a lot to see and do too. I don't want to go too much into it. Like I said, you could go out to Virginia to see the Air and Space Museum out by Dulles. You can go south of the city to Alexandria. Alexandria's center of town is Old Town, and it's very historic. It's very, early 1800s, really cute. Mount Vernon, which is George Washington's home, is just south of that. A little closer in to the city in Virginia is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in National Cemetery, which is at the General Lee's old house. If you want some Civil War history, there's the Naval Yard on the east side of town. And I don't know, I feel like I'm running out of things to say because there's just so much to see and do. There's more stuff in the north of town. I hope this gives you a little taste of all the thousands of things there is to see and do in DC. So even if you don't have kids that are studying U.S. history and you just want to come, it's a great weekend, great place for a weekend break. So that's it for this week, and I will talk to you next week.